These sewing mistakes really dealt with me when I was learning how to sew. I don't want you making them at all. So today I've taken our time to share these mistakes with you so that you can avoid making them. And if you're already making them, so you can stop making them. All right? Because I want you to enjoy sewing, to have clean, stress-free sewing. Okay? Now, let's get right into it. Now, the first on my list would be not pressing as you sew. This is one of the biggest sewing mistakes many sewists make. As obvious as it is, many people make this mistake. I used to be one of them. But I've been set free from this fundamental mistake that can ruin your sewing. Now, when you're sewing, you need to press as you sew. Press your seams as you sew. Not pressing your seam after you have finished sewing the entire garment. The reason is because your pressing iron will not be able to get into some corners because they had already been stitched. But when you stitch a few seams and then you press open your seams, then it will reflect in your finished garment. Your finished garment will look so beautiful without you doing nothing extraordinary. And with a good steam iron, you'll be able to easily open press your seams to relax very well. Now, this powerful steam iron has really helped me to open press my seam allowance or open press all my seams easily when I sew. I so much love this pressing iron because again, it regulates its temperature setting to any fabric you are working with. So you can never burn your garments no matter how light the fabric is. And even young children can easily use it because it turns off automatically when it is not in use. So just in case the kid forgets to turn off the iron, it will go off automatically. Yeah. Now I got this iron from Amazon, and I'll drop the link in the description box below in case you just want to check it out. Okay. The next biggest sewing mistake is not taking accurate measurement. Like seriously, this is the first thing you must learn before even starting to sew. Yeah, if you don't take your measurement properly, you will suffer, your garment will never fit. You'll be making several adjustments, and at the end of the day, you will waste your time and you still may not get the fit right. So don't be too much in a hurry to start sewing. Learn how to take proper measurement first. Okay, now if taking accurate measurement is a struggle for you, just kindly watch this tutorial here on YouTube where I showed how to take accurate measurement of yourself or for others. In fact, after watching it, you are going to thank me. Now this brings us to the next third biggest sewing mistake, and that is not learning the basics first. In fact, this particular sewing mistake almost made me quit sewing because like a lot of us, I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this. You see, most of us, when we first start learning how to sew, we just see something we like. We just want to sew everything that we like, forgetting that we don't have so much skills to sew some particular garment at that point. For example, as a beginner, what concerns you with making a jacket, a corset, or a wedding dress? Like, you just see a beautiful jacket and you're like, wow, I can sew this. Meanwhile, you forgot that you're just starting to learn. You are a newbie. You haven't even been able to sew some very simple things like making simple skirts or even making some other simple dresses. You just want to start sewing jackets, wedding dresses. Like, who gave you that courage? What kind of jacket do you think you will make? Disaster, right? Well, I'm not discouraging you from challenging yourself. No, not at all. I'm only saying that it's always best for us to learn the basics first. Now, things like how to sew simple skirts or simple dresses, it's best to start with these simple things first before going to complicated things or more challenging designs like jackets, wedding dresses, corsets, and things like that. Now, when you have finished learning those simple things or you have mastered them, then you can upgrade to something a little bit more difficult and challenging. Otherwise, you will find yourself struggling and struggling, not being able to sew well, and then you get frustrated and then you want to quit. Can you relate to this? Please, if you can relate to this, let me know in the comment section. I really want to hear from you. So please, if you want to enjoy sewing, learn the fundamentals of sewing. Get some sewing skills first. Start with simple projects. If you do that, you will be happy with yourself. Now, that is why in my school, my classes are all very arranged in a way that you start from very simple garments to a bit more difficult garments and then to advanced garments. Now, you can check it out using the link in the description box just to see how you can progressively learn from small to a bit more complicated and so on. You don't just jump right into sewing anything. You're not going to enjoy it. You're going to get frustrated along the line. So don't make this mistake. Or if you have been making this mistake, please stop making this mistake. Okay? The fourth biggest sewing mistake is not using the right fabric for a project. Now, I really think this one is the worst mistake ever, because when you use a wrong fabric for a project, no matter the sewing techniques and finishing you use in sewing that garment, it will still look tacky. Now, for example, if you use a sturdy fabric, a very stiff fabric, for a garment that is supposed to be fluid or drapey, your garment is going to hang on you as if you're wearing a carton, like seriously. So I advise that you fill your fabric first, then you can also place it on the mannequin. For example, if you want to make something that is a little bit fluid, you can take your fabric, test them out, take your mannequin like this, and then just drape it on top. See how, just take a look at how it feels. Does it drape well? Is it stiff? Because the way it looks on your mannequin, that is exactly how it's going to look on you when you finish sewing. Now, if it drapes really well, then you know that this garment, this fabric rather, it's okay for the garment you're going to make, depending on the style. Now, if you want a sturdy you want to make a sturdy garment, you also want to test out how it will look. Now, another thing that can also really help you is you want to check out your garments in your clothes. You want to check the ones you already have, the one you bought, the ones that are in your wardrobe. Check them and check the fabric types that were used for making those type of garments. That can give you an idea of what fabric will work for a particular garment. Okay, so I want you to try that one out. Now on to the fifth biggest sewing mistake, and that is not making a mock-up or a test fit. As a beginner, you especially need to form the habit of making a mock-up or a test fit. Now, mock-up simply means cutting and sewing your garment in a fabric that is very similar to what you will eventually make your garment from. So, for example, you are making a stretchy garment. You want to make a mock-up or a test fit in a stretchy fabric that is very similar to the fashioned fabric you are going to eventually make your garment with. Mock-up is actually not for beginners alone. I still do mock-ups even though I have been sewing for more than 20 years. Yes, the reason is because I don't want surprises and I don't want to waste my fashion fabrics. Fabrics are not cheap, so I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste my fashion fabrics. And then again, mock-ups, they help you to see all the mistakes and you're able to correct them before cutting on your fashion fabric. Guys, I finished stitching my mock-up and this is how it looks. Looks good, right? But there are a few corrections I really need to make. Now that way, you don't waste your fabric. You're also not frustrated as well. You're happy with your make, and yes, it takes a bit of time to make mock-up, but trust me, that time is worth it. The effort is really worth it because it's going to show in your finished garment. Your finished garment is going to fit very properly, just the way you like it. So it's really worth all that time. And sometimes you may even have to do more than one mock-up for a particular garment just for you to get the style or the design very correctly. Like, I still do more than one mock-up today, sometimes depending on the design, depending on the style, even with my years of sewing. But however, if you struggle with making mock-ups easily and very fast, let me know in the comment section. I can help you with that. I can create a tutorial where I will show you how you can easily go about making mock-ups very quickly, very easily. All right, leave a comment for me if you want me to do a tutorial to show you how to easily do mock-ups. Okay, so the sixth biggest sewing mistake is sewing when you are tired. Oh my, this one is a killer mistake. Have you tried sewing when tired? How does your garment turn out? I bet you already knows the answer. Too many mistakes, right? If you have experienced it before, leave a comment for me in the comment section. Let me know your experience with this. Now, when you sew when you're tired, you tend to cut corners because you are very tired. Now, your work can never be so clean compared to when you are not tired. In times like this, you tend to use quick finishing techniques that are not appropriate for that particular garment you are making. For example, where you're supposed to hand stitch, you just want to machine stitch because you're tired. You just want to get the work done as quickly as possible so you can go and rest. Another thing is, when you're trying to make buttonholes, if you're tired and you're trying to make buttonholes, or you're trying to install zipper when you're tired, come back later and then check them. Now, you can imagine how they will look. Ugly, right? So please, learn to rest. Learn to take a break. Never sew when you are tired. Please, you will avoid double work and then you will enjoy your sewing more. So if you're tired, pack up all your sewing things, leave the sewing room, go and sleep, take a walk, take a cup of coffee, just go and rest, and then you come back to sewing later. Okay, now that moves us to our seventh biggest sewing mistake, and that is not notching or pinning fabrics when you sew. Now, if you have when you finish drafting your patterns and then you have some notches or some marks on your patterns, and when you place these patterns on your fabric, you want to try as much as possible to transfer these notches or these markings into your fabric. If you don't do that, then you're going to make mistakes. For example, if you didn't notch where your darts are supposed to be, now when you want to stitch it, you may not be exactly sure where you are supposed to stitch, so it's not going to balance very well. So it's important that you transfer your notches or your markings on your pattern into your fabric when you are cutting or just after cutting. Okay, now another thing is the pinning. It's also important for you to pin when you sew. Pin the two seams together when you sew. Well, this may not be for all the seams, but there are some particular seams that you have to join together that you need to pin. When you pin them, what you notice is you will notice that the patterns will match very well. Now, for example, if you're sewing some fabrics and you're joining maybe the front and the back together, and you didn't pin these things, you know what happens sometimes? The front may be longer than the back. If you want to try it, if you see sometimes when you're sewing, you will notice that the top fabric is shorter than the one at the bottom because you didn't pin them. So the feed dog has stretched out or has moved the one in front and didn't pick the one underneath. This happens more often even when you are stitching stretchy fabrics. Please try to pin them very well because when you pin them, your feed dog picks them together because the pins there, they serve as a guide. Now it takes a bit of time to do it, but is it worth it? Yes, it is definitely worth it. So I always advise that you pin your fabrics together or your patterns together when you are stitching so that you can your patterns will match when you finish stitching, okay? And then you have a very clean finished garment. All right, now let's move on to the 8th biggest sewing mistake, and that will be not cutting your patterns on the straight grain. Now for every pattern that you create, you need to put your straight grain, and even if you're using store-bought commercial sewing patterns, they all come with straight grain. Now for example, these are some of the patterns I created. You see, these are straight grain. The straight grains are always parallel to the center front and center back. Now your fabric also has straight grain. Now the straight grain, you see, this is my selvage. All fabric have this selvage. Now the selvage is, or the straight grain is parallel to the selvage. So if this is my selvage, the fine woven part of my fabric, the straight grain runs parallel to it. Now when you want to place your pattern, place the patterns that requires placing the grain, the straight grain on the straight grain of the fabric. Please place them like that. You see, like that. I hope you understand. Now this one may look like it's a very simple thing. It doesn't matter how you place your patterns on your fabric as long as your fabric is enough and you just cut them. It is very important because there are some garments that you will make. If you do not place your patterns, the straight grain of your patterns against the straight grain of your fabric, it will show when you have finished your garment. Let me give an example. If you are making a pant, for example, and you're using a denim fabric, trust me, if you did not place the straight grain of the pant against the straight grain of the denim fabric you're using, by the time you finish stitching it, your crease line in front may twist. The leg of your pant may twist a bit and you will not like it. You may not notice it when you are stitching, but when you are finished, the overall look will not appeal to the eyes. So it's really important for you to place the straight grain of your patterns against the straight grain of your fabric before cutting them. Okay, if you have any questions about that, please leave them in the comment section. I'll be happy to help. Okay, good. Now let's move on to the 8th sewing mistake, and that would be forgetting to add seam allowance. Have you forgotten to add seam allowance before? Wow, how did your garment turn out? Tight, right? Yes, that's what eventually happens. Now there are 2 ways you can add seam allowance. One of the ways to add seam allowance is once you finish drafting your patterns, then you add your seam allowance all around your patterns. For example, this is my pattern, and then I add seam allowance all around my patterns. Okay, now a second way you can do this is you can draft your patterns on your master draft. Some people cut their master draft and then they place it on their fabric, and then while they are on their fabric, they want to cut on the fabric, they then start adding seam allowance to it. I do this sometimes, but I don't really encourage this for beginners, like adding seam allowance while you are cutting your fabric. The reason is because we can easily forget, and if you forget, there is really no remedy to this, because you did not add seam allowance. If you stitch the garment without those seam allowance, the garment is going to be very tight. So I always advise that when you create your patterns, once you finish creating your patterns, you've traced them out, add your seam allowance directly to your patterns so that you don't forget. Because even me, as long as, no matter how many years I've been sewing, I still tend to forget if I don't add seam allowance directly to the patterns. So I advise that you add your seam allowance to the patterns, and then before you before you cut your fabric, not when you are cutting your fabric. I hope it makes sense. It works both ways too. I'm just saying, for beginners, in order for you not to forget to add your seam allowance, it is best that you add them to your patterns, not when you're cutting your fabric. I hope you get that. Okay, so the 10th sewing mistake, as small as it seems, is a very big sewing mistake, and that is not using the right tools. There are tools for almost everything sewing. Buy them and make your life easier. Yeah. For example, buy good pins that won't pull or damage your fabric. The ones that are sharp enough to pass through your fabric easily. Buy good quality thread. The ones that don't break. They make sewing less stressful. Use a good pair of scissors or a rotary cutter for cutting your fabric. And then again, use the right size of needle depending on the type of fabric you are working on. The needle type and the needle size is as important as well. Never use wrong needles for sewing. You use smaller needles for lightweight fabrics, and then you use bigger needles for medium to heavyweight fabrics. Now use jean needles for jeans, and then stretch needles or ballpoint needles for stretch fabrics. Okay, now using the right tools for sewing makes a huge difference in your sewing. I'll drop the Amazon links to some of these tools that I've mentioned in the description box below. You can check them out. And then most importantly, buy good fabrics, please. Good quality fabrics does not really need to be expensive, but good quality fabrics can actually determine how good, how beautiful your finished garment is going to look. Okay, now if you have a problem telling how a good quality fabric, the next video that is going to show will help you, will guide you to be able to tell good quality fabrics very quickly. So far, did you enjoy this tutorial? The 10 sewing mistakes that we have just talked about. Which one of them can you relate with? Which one of them have you been making? Which one of them did you just find that it was a mistake that you want to stop? Please let me know in the comment section. And if I missed anyone out, any of these sewing mistakes, please add them in the comment section so that we can all learn together. And if you have gotten to this stage, if you watch this tutorial up to this stage and you are not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please do well to subscribe and join my sewing community. Thank you so much. I'll see you again in my next video. Bye bye.